stories, and we haven't talked about these yet, but in the book I lay out 25 different types of sales stories, and we've only really talked about one of them, but some of the types that I think would be very good for somebody in the dental field to share while they've got that captive audience, largely who can't talk back all the time, are success stories of your other clients. So if you're working on somebody in your dental chair, they're already a customer, right? It's not like there's somebody walking around in your store deciding whether or not they're going to buy what you're selling or not. They've already decided. They're in your chair. You're working on them now. So the type of stories you tell people who are current customers are stories to help them want to be loyal to you in the future so that they will come back to you over and over and over again.
Hey everybody, I'm Ken Newhouse, and I'm going to welcome you to the Get Clients Now podcast, the show where high-growth consultants and professionals come to access the newest and most effective methods and systems for online marketing, advanced sales and persuasive communication strategies, and automated marketing funnels. And if you're wondering if the Get Clients Now podcast can help you get more high-value clients, enjoy more sales, build a massive tribe, and make more money, you're absolutely going to love this show.
Newhouse's work completely blows everything else that we've ever done with Google out of the water.
I have been looking for a way to grow my presence online, and what I've viewed from Newhouse's work was something that certainly is faster than anything I've seen before.
He says he's going to do something and he does it. He does it in the time frame that he says he's going to do it in. It's exciting when you talk about the results that you're going to get, and you can believe his word because he follows it up with action.
The Newhouse is direct, he's to the point, he tells you what's on his mind, and he backs his words up. From what I know now, from working with him, he's passionate about his work, and he backs it up 100%.
What I like best is you offer something that no one else has out there, which is a pretty comprehensive approach about marketing a system.
If somebody asks me, should they use Newhouse's team? Absolutely, because you're going to get the important information that you need very, very quickly.
On the internet, on the different marketing techniques, I've never experienced anything like this.
I would definitely recommend Ken Newhouse for someone who's serious about growing their business. I think that your results based on the numbers would at least double the sales in a very short time frame.
Hey everybody, Ken Newhouse here, and I want to welcome you back to the Get Clients Now podcast, the show that helps dentists, professionals, and consultants clarify their messaging, create a profitable marketing strategy so they can build their tribe with certainty. This is episode number 325, and on today's show marks the first of a two-part interview that I recently did with best-selling author, speaker, and leading expert in the field of using stories to sell more of our products and services, and that would be Mr. Paul Smith. Now, as everybody knows, and as scientific research has delivered literally a preponderance of evidence, using well-crafted stories in your sales process makes converting prospects into paying patients, clients, and customers much, much easier. And even more importantly, listen to this, is a writer-downer. Been proven beyond a shadow of a doubt that using stories is literally your golden ticket for selling high-value services and high-value products. Now, incorporating well-thought-out stories for decades was literally one of the best-kept secrets high performers use to sell ultra-high-end products and services. So as an example, if you're a dentist and you want to convert more of those full mouth restoration prospects into paying patients, or if you're a dentist who wants to get more of your biorejuvenation prospects to become paying patients, or if you're a consultant and you're selling high 5- and 6-figure consulting services, what you're going to learn from Paul today is going to help you do just that and do it much, much faster and much, much easier than you could have ever imagined possible. Now, in preparation for the show, guys, I actually did a little research online and I found a clip from the show Mad Men. I'm sure a lot of you guys have actually watched the show. I never watched it, but after watching this clip, I think I'm going to actually go back and start watching these shows, not to be entertained, but because of all the instruction when it comes to advertising, marketing, copywriting, communication, selling that you can learn from a television show. But this little clip I'm going to play for you is actually a scene where Don Draper was selling a very high-value prospect, actually got the sale, got the contract, got the award to write the copy, to write the ads, and he did it by using a very powerful yet simple story to convince these people to hire his company. Listen to this, it's absolutely amazing.
Lynn Taylor. No Eastmans today, unfortunately. They're all back in the lab.
It's a wonderful facility, but they don't take vacations.
What do they show? Slides of them working?
So, have you figured out a way to work the wheel into it?
We know it's hard because wheels aren't really seen as exciting technology, even though they are the original.
Well, technology is
a glittering lure. But there's the rare occasion when the public can be engaged on a level beyond flash, if they have a sentimental bond with the product. My first job, I was in-house at a fur company with this old pro copywriter, Greek, named Teddy. And Teddy told me the most important idea in advertising is new. Creates an itch. You simply put your product in there as a kind of calamine lotion. But he also talked about a deeper bond with the product. Nostalgia. It's delicate, but potent.
Now, I want to quickly interject something here before his cut continues. He's about to use a slide projector to show pictures of him with his children and his family. And I guess, being a person who didn't watch the show, I'm not familiar with the series, this has meaning to the people in the room. So he's showing slides as he tells this story of him with his, I guess, ex-wife maybe, with his children, in very loving, affectionate pictures. He shows one picture where he's got his head on his wife's lap and he's asleep and she's like playing with his hair. Many pictures with his children, many pictures of them as a family. But I just wanted to give you that context because you don't have that by listening to the clip. All right, let's go ahead and continue.
Sweetheart. Teddy told me that in Greek, nostalgia literally means the pain from an old wound. It's a twinge in your heart, far more powerful than memory alone. This device isn't a spaceship. It's a time machine. It goes backwards and forwards. It takes us to a place where we ache to go again. It's not called the wheel. It's called the carousel. It lets us travel the way a child travels. Round and around, and back home again. To a place where we know we are loved.
Good luck at your next meeting.
Now, like I said, guys, this created an amazing level of emotional response from not only his staff, not only the other men in the room that work with him, not only the other, I guess, owners of the company, but from the prospects themselves. In fact, one of the people that he worked with actually got up in tears and left the room, I guess, because he remembered the good times when Don Draper was married or whatever. That's my summation or understanding of the clip. But it was a very moving and powerful story. And it's a great example of how we can utilize stories, not necessarily this kind of story, but the fact that we can use the mechanism of communication, the tool in communication known as story, to help us bond with our clients, bond with our patients, bond with our customers, and to sell a lot more of our stuff. All right, we're going to go ahead and bring Paul in on the show, but before we do that, I want to tell you who this show, in fact, this series is for, quote unquote, for, and who it's not for. Today's show, and in fact, the follow-up show to this one, are specifically for dentists, professionals, and consultants who provide super high value, super high ticket services or products to their patients, their clients, and customers, people who are looking for methods and strategies that can deliver literally a substantial and immediate increase in your bottom line. Okay, this show is for people who are looking for methods and strategies that are going to get more of their prospects to say, yes, let's do this. Let's go ahead and do it. so that those prospects will be excitedly and happily pulling out the credit cards so you can start making more money in your practice or business. This two-part series with Paul is also for people who can appreciate hard data, like actual facts, which is readily available across the internet. And I'm talking about data that proves beyond the shadow of a doubt, the shadow of any doubt, that incorporating story into every part of your business, every element of your business, can quickly and consistently increase the amount of money that you're putting into the bank, and that's month in and month out. So who is this series with Paul not for? I want to address this as well because this is important. Well, it's not for those folks who are on their way to becoming, as I like to say, extinct business owners. So whether you're a dentist, whether you're a chiropractor, whether you're a professional consultant, small business, it doesn't matter. You are on your way to extinction, and very, very quickly if you are one of the people that falsely believe that all this talk about using stories in your sales process and in your business is just a bunch of like ethereal nonsense. The show is also not for people that believe a solid, fact-based presentation is the very best way to sell high-ticket services and products. You know, a lot of these people actually believe that, as an example, Elvis is still alive. They also believe that UFOs are real. And they also believe that not having a solid presence online for you and your business will have little to no effect on the future success and profitability of your business. These are the naysayers. These are the complainers. These are the critics. These are the whiners. And thankfully, we have very few of those kind of people actually listening to this show because I do my very, very best to say things that are going to irritate them so that they'll actually leave, because I don't want those kind of people listening to my show. And that actually brings me to my next point, and I'll run through this quickly. You know, during the course of this show, today's episode number 325, I've invested a lot of time, money, and effort in this show, and I've done that for you and your behalf. But I've never asked, actually, let me rephrase that. I've only asked maybe 2 or 3 times for you guys to leave me a review on the show. So I'm asking you today, if you could, leave me a review. Leave me an honest review at the end of today's show. Do it today. Don't wait, because if you wait, you're going to end up, if you're like me, you'll just not do it. So do it today after the end of this show. After you've listened to this show, go to the bottom of your iTunes and leave an honest review. And the reason I'm asking you to do this is because I've got a bet with the beautiful and talented Lisa. Now, I actually believe we can get to 50 reviews by the end of this week. The beautiful and talented Lisa, obviously, you know, is my wife, doesn't think we can get there. And so Lisa and I have a bet. I honestly believe that we can get a few more reviews. I think we need 11 or 12 so that we can hit 50 by the end of the week. And so as a result of that belief, Lisa and I have this little friendly wager, so to speak. And here's the wager. If you guys come through and get me those reviews by the end of the week so that I hit the magic number of 50, which is really not that many. And actually, I probably should be more proactive and ask for more reviews, but I just, it's just not my style necessarily. But if you guys can get me to 50 by the end of the week, Lisa is going to be obligated to take me to the restaurant of my choice. Now, if I don't hit 50 by the end of the week, I'm going to have to take the beautiful and talented Lisa to the restaurant of her choice. The surprise for her is this. The restaurant of my choice is not here in St. Louis. The restaurant of my choice is Doc Ford's on Captiva Island. And I haven't been to Doc Ford's for, I don't know, probably 5 or 6 years now. And the reason we haven't been there is because we got rid of our place on Sanibel. So it's a beautiful place. I love going there. And Doc Ford's is probably my all-time favorite restaurant. Just the experience of being there. You're out over the water. It's kind of, the restaurant's built on a pier. It's really, really nice. So if you guys could totally hook me up here, if you guys can help me hit 50, I would be greatly appreciative for it. And as a result of that, if you leave me an honest review and then simply send me an email, what I'll do for you is I will actually give you a copy of Eugene Schwartz's best-selling book, Breakthrough Advertising. Now, Breakthrough Advertising, literally, if you ask me or any other high-level direct response copywriter or marketer, what the best book, the most helpful book, the most informative book, the most amazing book about how to market and how to communicate and how to write copy ever written was, 99 times out of 100, they're going to tell you that it was Breakthrough Advertising by Eugene Schwartz. He's now deceased. This book is probably 40 years old. I was actually just reading it again last night, and that's why it's coming to mind. And Breakthrough Advertising has more depth, it has more information, it has more how-to, like taking you step by step by step, breaking down how to write copy, whether it's for an ad or a marketing campaign or a video or your sales presentation or communications with your patients, your clients, your customers. It is far, far more in-depth than any of the books that Caples wrote. And by the way, John Caples, actually wrote what is arguably one of the best direct response ads ever written. And the ad I'm referring to? They laughed when I sat down at the piano, but when I started to play, it's one of the best producing direct response ads of all time, even until this day. And that ad was written about 70 years ago, 60 to 70 years ago. So Breakthrough Advertising, Without question, if you were limited to having only one resource book in your marketing arsenal, you would want it to be Breakthrough Advertising, without question. So that's what I'm willing to give you in exchange for an honest review, but you got to email and let me know. And once you email me and let me know, then I'll send you a copy of the book. All right, let's go ahead and run through Paul's bio, and then we're going to bring him in on the show. Paul Smith is one of the world's leading experts in organizational storytelling. He's a popular keynote speaker and a corporate trainer in leadership and sales storytelling techniques, a former executive and 20-year veteran of the Procter & Gamble Company. He's the best-selling author of 3 books, Lead with a Story, Sell with a Story, which is going to be the focus of the show, this show, and the next show, and Parenting with a Story. Paul's work's been featured in The Wall Street Journal, Time Magazine, Fast Company, Success, Forbes, The Washington Post, PR News, CIO Magazine, Investors Business Daily, Marketing Research Magazine, the American Banking Journal, and London's Edge Magazine, among others. You can find out more about Paul, and I'll include all this in the show notes, but his website is www.leadwithastory.com. That's leadwithastory.com. You can find all of his books, information about his training. This guy's going all over the place. But guys, I've studied communication for many, many years. It's a passion of mine. I'm doing my best to try to bring this information to you, and utilizing story throughout your business, but especially in the sales process, is going to give you a tremendous advantage over your competition. It's going to really endear you to the marketplace. It's going to help you become more memorable. It's going to help you become more trustworthy. It's going to improve your professional reputation, not only in the marketplace, but online. The power of story is absolutely incredible. A couple of examples. What is the one and only communication tool that can hold a person's attention for 90 minutes to 2 hours so that they're not looking at their phone, so that they're not fidgeting around, they're not distracted by anything else, they are dialed in 110%. That's called a story, okay? And I'm referring to like movies. A good movie, a good book, right? Think about television shows. I don't watch much television, but think about TV shows. The most watched shows on television today, for the most part, are reality TV shows. Shows with a story. I don't know if you've ever seen the show American Pickers. It's one of the few shows that I will actually invest my time to watch. And that's because that show has a tremendous story associated with the individuals, not just the people doing the picking, but each of the people they go visit and then try to buy their old antique stuff from has a story. It's shows like that that captivate people's attention. And so if you guys will invest the time and listen to what Paul has for us on the show, this episode and the next, I want to give you my personal guarantee that you will be able to sell more of your high-ticket new patients, clients, prospects. You'll get more of them to convert and accept your recommendations and give you money. You'll generate more referrals, and business in general becomes much, much easier when the sales process becomes much, much easier. When the sales process is, I guess you could say, on autopilot, when it's become almost automatic, doing business and working in your business actually becomes fun at that point. The stress level is minimized, if not completely evaporated. So listen to what he has to say after the podcast. Rate the podcast. Honestly, if you do that for me, that'd be great. Email me. I'll get you a copy of Breakthrough Advertising. And the last thing I want to say is this. Paul himself has got an awesome podcast. It's called Sell with a Story. All right. You can find that in iTunes. It's a fabulous podcast. So with that, let's go ahead and bring Paul in on the show. All right, guys, we've got Paul Smith, the best-selling author of multiple books. I'm very, very excited about our interview today. And Paul is one of the books that we're going to be talking about specifically today. We can certainly ask questions about the other books, but the book that I'm most interested in, certainly the book that I'm focusing this interview on, in fact, the whole series on, is Paul's runaway best-selling book, Sell with a Story. So Paul, on behalf of myself and the members of Get Clients Now Nation, and on behalf of all of the followers from .com Dentist, I want to welcome you to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I'm excited to be here.
All right, guys, before we get started, and this is something that I don't do with every one of my guests. In fact, probably about 8 or 10% of my guests that I'm willing to do this for. But what I want to do, in light of the fact that Paul's written several best-selling books, the book that we're going to be dealing with today and in this series, this show and the next show following, specifically the book titled Sell with a Story, This is a book that is so valuable, that is such a good investment. In fact, I think it's worth multiples of whatever you could buy. I actually bought the book on a Kindle, and I bought the audio version as well, so I could kind of read and then also listen. But if you guys will invest in his book, I'm telling you right now, invest in the book, go through it, use what he teaches you in the book. And by the time that you've actually started to implement this, if you can't say this has been one of the best investments I've made in a book for myself and for my business, if you can't say that, which you will be able to say that, you're either going to be able to say that, and if you can't, email me, contact me, and I will buy that book from you. Obviously, you can keep it. I don't need more copies, but and I'll replace it with a book of equal or lesser value. And as my disclaimer always is, no creepy, weird romance novels or anything like that. It has to be another sales book. But I don't make this guarantee often, guys, but I'm telling you, this is one of those books that if you want to sell more in your business without being salesy, if you want to be more engaging and more magnetic to your patients, your clients, and your customers, and I know a lot of the people listening, just the whole idea of selling kind of freaks you out. There is an art to this, and this guy has literally mastered it. And I don't know why, but he pretty much gave it all to us, or virtually all of it, in the book. So I want to start with that. And then I want to ask you the first question if you're ready to go.
Yeah, well, first of all, let me thank you for offering a guarantee on my book. I've never had anybody offer a money-back guarantee on my book, so thanks for that.
Well, I don't do it often, but there have been probably a dozen books over the 300. I think this is 324. That this will be show 324.
Wow.
And I've been interviewed probably 3, maybe 4 dozen best-selling authors. So and other people who haven't written books, but they have awesome training courses. Like, just the list is pretty long. But I don't necessarily feel secure in guaranteeing them. I'll recommend a lot. Obviously, I'm recommending them by having them on the show. But the fact that I've been able to gain tremendous benefit for myself is one of the keys for me to recommend and guarantee someone's work. So happy to do that.
I'm glad to hear that. Yeah, let's dive in.
So the first question I have is, I'm always interested, and a lot of these questions I'm going to ask are my curiosity. I want to kind of satisfy my own curiosity. But if you could give us a backstory, a brief backstory, take a couple, 2-3 minutes, whatever you need, 4 minutes. I'm not going to hold the clock on you, but what are some of the events that kind of brought you from wherever it was that you started in life that got you to the point now where you're one of the leading authorities in the world on teaching people how to actually lead with a story, or as the book today we're talking about, sell with a story? How did you get there?
Yeah, so my early career was pretty typical corporate business career path. I got an undergraduate degree in economics, a master's in business, spent a couple of years at a consulting firm, what's now Accenture, and then went to work for the Procter & Gamble company. And I spent 2 years there in, like I said, a fairly traditional corporate career path, making my way through the ranks in finance and accounting at first, and most of my 20 years there in consumer and communications research. But along the way, I just got fascinated with this topic of storytelling. That frustrated me. And it frustrated me, they didn't teach me that, Brad. They didn't even teach me that in business school. They didn't teach me that at Accenture, and they didn't teach me that at Procter & Gamble either. But yet I was slowly beginning to recognize how important it was for the leaders that I admired most, that they had this skill that I just couldn't quantify very well and couldn't figure out how to do it right. And so I started interviewing the leaders that I admired the most and wanted to kind of be like and to work for, as I was making my way through the company, and eventually started interviewing leaders outside the company. And at this point, I think I'm up to around 300 or so CEOs, executives, salespeople, marketers, engineers, whatever. In probably 25 countries around the world, hundreds of different companies. And these aren't like some impersonal surveys that I'm sending out. These are one-to-one, face-to-face, 2-hour-long interviews with these leaders. And I'm basically just asking questions. What situation were you in when you told a story? What story did you tell? And did it work? Right. And so I've interviewed, on average, they've offered 8 to 10 to 12 different stories. So if you do the math, I've literally documented around 3,000 different leadership and sales stories. And so what that's allowed me to do is to reverse engineer my way into what works and what doesn't. And obviously along the way, somewhere it stopped being my own selfish personal learning journey and became an idea for that first, which was lead with a story. The sell with a story that we're going to talk about today is the third in that series. But it very quickly led to a career change for me because that struck a nerve with people. Apparently, there were a lot of other people out there like me who wanted to know how to be better storytellers, but had no idea how to do it. And so, yeah, after that first book came out, I think it's in its 11th or 12th printing now, and it's in 7 or 8 languages around the world. And that, you know, the phone started ringing pretty quickly. And so within a year, I left P&G, and this is what I do for a living now. So not only do I write books on the topic, but I teach training courses and do speeches and storytelling coaching for executives and things like that. So this is now my full-time work is teaching people how to be better storytellers.
Isn't that amazing how just certain twists of fate, so to speak, will take you in a certain direction, or certain things that happen and take you in a direction that you never imagined possible?
Yeah, I mean, I could not have predicted that this is what I'd be doing right now at all, but I do love it, so it's all good.
Yeah, imagine just, I mean, I see the ring on your finger. I don't know about your wife or anything like that,
Yes.
but just imagine when you first got married, you know, if you told your wife, yeah, I'm going to actually have a coaching program and write, you know, all these best-selling books on how to use stories to lead people and sell and parent and things like that. She probably would have said, what?
Yeah, I'm not sure I would have gotten a second date if that was what I was telling her I was going to do. Well, there's a lot of risk to that, right? I mean, I hear I had a really cushy corporate job, and I quit it to go do something with no paycheck, no benefits, no salary, no guarantee of anything. So it was a big risk to take, to leave a corporate job like that 20 years in, and in my mid 40s at the time, you know, too young for retirement and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, she had to come on this journey with me to, you know, be supportive of me making this kind of a risky change. But I'm 7 years in now, and it's worked out well, and she's happy. And so life's
maybe
good.
there will be a book on the horizon, how to actually lead your wife with a story, or your spouse with a story.
I've been asked, so yeah, it's on my long list of potential ideas.
There you go. All right, so listen, you have literally interviewed a whole lot of people, but Paul, is there a person, like an individual maybe, or even a circumstance that really stands out in your mind that had a tremendous impact on you that kind of helped you to get where you are today?
Well, yeah, so I'm particularly impressed. So I often get asked, who are the best storytellers out there? And you know, you probably have opinions about those, and there are certain politicians that you think are good storytellers, and certain, people think of Steve Jobs, for example, you know, certain business icons. The people that impress me the most are the ones that you'd never expect to be a good storyteller, but who are anyway. So you asked for two. So the two I'll give you, one is Sarah Matthew. She's retired now. She was the CEO and chairman of the board of the Dun & Bradstreet company, right? Her career, she grew up in the finance and accounting ranks. In fact, the reason I know her is I worked with her at Procter & Gamble. She was my boss. She gave me my first big promotion, but ended up leaving P&G and going to Dun & Bradstreet as their chief financial officer, and then their chief operating officer, and then ultimately their chief executive officer and chairman of the board. And so you don't expect the accountant to grow up and be the good storyteller,
no,
right?
It's like an engineer being a storyteller.
But she did. Exactly. But she did. And there are a number of stories about her in my books. And there's stories, not only stories about stories that she tells, and that she tells very well. And so that impressed me, that sometimes you expect the salespeople or the marketers, certainly the actors, to be great storytellers, and the writers, but expect the accountants too. And that kind of leads me to the second one, which is John Bryant, who was the CEO. He's also retired now, but at the time I was interviewing him, was the CEO of Kellogg's, the breakfast cereal maker. And same thing, his career, he grew up in finance and was the chief financial officer before he was the chief executive officer. And again, a great storyteller. And there you'll find some stories about him in my books as well. And those impress me more because they clearly didn't come naturally to them. And but they learned to do it. And now I can't claim that, I taught them. Certainly that's not the case. I was more learning from them than they were from me. But the point is, you can learn how to be a better storyteller, by observation, if you make it a point to, which I did. And I went a step further and interviewed people and asked them, how they did it, and watched, and really more dissected the results of their storytelling. But the main thing I learned from that is this is a learnable skill. It's in fact, I liken it to art. In fact, well, storytelling is an art, but it's like, music or painting or dance or, there are some people who are naturally gifted at it and born that way, and some of us who are not. But if you wanted to learn to play the guitar and you're not a naturally gifted musician, you could probably learn to play the guitar. Now, you may not, ever sell out Carnegie Hall, but you could probably learn to strum out a few tunes. And the way you do that is you'd hire a guitar teacher, right? You'd go take lessons, so it is a learnable skill if you just set your mind to it. So, buy a book, take a class, watch some videos online, but learn it like you would any other skill.
I am, personally, like I said, I am so captivated by this whole concept of communication and being able to, my whole take on this is if you can become a master of communication, and obviously we're talking about ethical communication here, but if you become a master of communication, and yes, there is an element of communication that's not verbal with your body language, but we're talking about the verbal element to it as well, you can pretty much achieve just about anything you want in life within, the limits of reality. And so for me, as a business person and as a person who really has a desire to serve my clients and really help them achieve the maximum level of success that they want to achieve, and in turn, so they can serve the people that are their patients or their clients or customers, you have to master communication. So with respect to communication, I've been studying NLP for a long time. I've been studying a lot of different elements of communication. But to me, the one thing that I really feel like I need to dramatically improve on is the art of using story in my business and just in my personal life as well. And it's like you said, it's a skill you can learn. One of the first questions that I want to ask, and I think this will kind of put a smile on your face when you ask, is it put a smile on my face when I read it. But a lot of us have been to the ocean. A lot of us, I've been to Hawaii multiple times. I've been to Jamaica and Mexico, and I love the ocean. I love the mountains more, but I love going to the ocean. I love to fish. I'm an avid fisherman. But in all the years and all my trips to the ocean around the world, I have never in my life, and I know you know where I'm going with this, I've never seen a pig swimming in the ocean. Tell us, take a minute or two and kind of set us off with that, because that's a great story. The way what you told in the book, just go ahead and tell the story. It's great.
Yeah, so I was with my wife at an art fair in Cincinnati, Ohio, and she likes going to these things. She's an artist herself, but that day she had a goal. She was looking for a picture for our son's bathroom here at home. And so we were going booth to booth and to this one booth of this underwater photographer, a guy named Chris Guglielmello. Okay, look the guy up. He's worth it. Chris Guglielmello. He takes these rising underwater pictures of sea anemones and coral reefs and, sharks and all kinds of things. And so she's flipping through his pictures and just gets attached to this picture that to me looked about as out of place as a pig in the ocean, as you mentioned. And the reason is because it was literally a picture of a pig in the ocean. And I just thought, well, that's the craziest thing, right? Pigs don't swim. They don't, they're not seafaring creatures, right? So he was there, and he and my wife were talking. Well, eventually I got my turn to ask a question. So I was like, Chris, dude, what's with the pig in the ocean, right? And that magic started. I said, oh, yeah, it was the craziest thing, Paul. He said, that picture was taken off the coast of this uninhabited island in the Bahamas called Big Major Cay. And he said, apparently what happened was a few years ago, some local entrepreneur decided to raise a pig farm for bacon, I guess. Well, he found out there was this uninhabited island where he could keep the pigs for free. Well, he's no dummy, so he puts them, on the free place, right? But he says, but look in the picture. And he says, and he points up behind the pig up on the beach. He says, look up there on the beach. What kind of vegetation do you see growing back there off the beach? And I looked and squinted and said, well, the only thing up there I recognize are cactus. And he said, right, that's a problem, right? Pigs don't like cactus, right? So literally there was nothing for them to eat on the island. So the entrepreneur wasn't that smart after all, right? He hadn't thought far enough ahead. So, the pigs didn't have anything to eat. But fortunately for the pigs and the entrepreneur, a local restaurant owner on a neighboring island every night was kitchen refuse over to Big Major Cay and dumping it a few dozen yards offshore, right off the side of the boat. Well, eventually, these pigs, or probably anybody, you get hungry enough, you'll do anything, right? So they can see and smell this food floating out there in the ocean, a few dozen yards away. So eventually, one little pig gets brave enough to, swim out there or dog paddle or pig paddle his way out there to get the food. Well, first it's one little piggy and then two little piggies and three little piggies. And here it is, several generations later, pigs on Big Major Cay can swim. And, in fact, they don't even call it Big Major Cay anymore. Everybody knows it as Pig Island now. And if you ever go on a cruise in the Bahamas, you'll ask them to take you to Pig Island, and they'll take you. It's still there, and the pig's swimming out there. So now, of course, at that moment, I already had my credit card out, and I'm like, well, sold. Right, we'll take it, right? And the reason is, think about that. 2 minutes earlier, that picture was worth nothing to me. I mean, it was just a silly picture of a pig in the ocean that made no sense at all. But 2 minutes later, after hearing that, I had to have it because I thought it was this fabulous story, and it's a history lesson and a geography lesson and an animal psychology lesson all kind of rolled into one. And I love hearing the story. I love telling the story. If you come visit me in my house and go to the bathroom, you're going to hear the story again, right? I'm going to tell you. So the story literally made the product he was selling, so to speak, much more valuable to me, because now I wasn't just buying a picture. I was buying a picture that had a story with it.
So this is a question, I didn't write this down, but it's a question that I want to ask. How is it that, we can obviously see, everybody can see that why the picture became much more valuable. In fact, in my mind, it makes it more valuable. But what is it about the element of story? What is it about a good story, in fact, I'm going to qualify that, not just any story, but the right kind of story, a good story, that if we can attach that to our service or our product, what does it give the person who is our patient, our client, our customer, when they do a transaction with us? What is it that we're giving them in addition to our service or our product by attaching a story to it? What is it that they get? What is that thing? I don't know how to ask this the right way, that comes from the story being attached? Because, for you, I see it gives you increased status as the person who bought the picture with the pig. Now you've got something that's like,
well, it's a conversation piece now.
Yes.
Right? It starts,
and it
starts conversations.
Yes. So in addition to being a conversation piece, I'm looking for like emotions. There's so much that a really good story can give you. And so I don't know if we don't have the time to answer this fully or dive into this, but it really does pique my curiosity. There's something magnificent, extremely valuable that you can't necessarily put a price tag on, but it's inherently visible to everyone. If you'll just stop and think about it for just a second, it makes total sense. It makes everything much more valuable. Yeah.
In fact, some people have tried to quantify this before. I think it's Rob Walker and Josh Glenn did this fascinating experiment. They Significant Objects Project. I think I wrote about it in the book there. They went around to flea markets and garage sales and bought a bunch of junk, quite frankly. In fact, they bought 100 items and they paid a total of $129. So on average, $1.29 per item. And then they sold them all on eBay one at a time, but they sold them, the way they sold them, instead of a description of what it was, they asked people to write stories about those things. And sometimes they were just, made up fictional stories. In fact, they probably all of them were. But that was clear that that's what that was. It wasn't like they were trying to fool anybody into thinking this was some special thing.
They told everyone. In fact, you said in the book that they told people these weren't true stories, that they were attaching to these products they were going to sell on eBay.
Yeah. So we're writing a fictional story about this just for fun, I guess. Well, and they ended up selling them for $3,600 in total. So whatever that works out to be in terms of a return on investment, it's pretty good. So the point is, it wasn't just me with that pig. Turns out everybody, most people, are willing to pay more money for an item that has a attached to it than they are without. And the fact that it's a conversation piece is one of the reasons what you and I just talked about. But there are other reasons as well, benefits to sharing stories. And one of the bigger ones is that human beings, it turns out, we make the logical, rational decisions always that we'd like to think we do. It turns out, and there's been a lot of cognitive science to back this up, that many times human beings make just emotional decisions in one place in their brain, and then they justify those decisions logically and rationally a few nanoseconds later in a different place in the brain, a more conscious thinking, logical processing part of the brain. So that's why we leave a decision-making process thinking that we've made it for these logical reasons, but the truth is our kind of reptilian brain has decided, a few seconds earlier to do it for more emotional, gut reaction reasons. And it turns out stories are great at reaching both parts of the brain. Whereas just telling people kind of your features and benefits and, here's what I sell and here's the kind of practice, that I run at, in my clinic here or whatever, that speaks to one part of the brain, the logical processing part of the brain, but it won't speak to the other part of the brain. But stories speak to both parts. And that's one of the main reasons why they're so effective.
Yeah, actually, one of the first people I ever interviewed for the Get Clients Now podcast is a gentleman named Paul. He runs a company called Emotive Analytics, and So I think you may have referenced this study in your book. If not, it's been referenced multiple times. But a gentleman actually had something like a frontal lobotomy, and he was unable to make decisions because his ability to experience emotions was lost. And so I would say virtually most people don't understand this. They're thinking they're making logical decisions when it comes to either business to business sales or business to consumer. They're really trying to appeal to that logical, the clients or the prospect's logical filter, so to speak, to make the purchase. But in reality, it's emotions that govern our purchase decisions. It's more so than I think logic. I mean, at least on that subconscious level, it's a big driver that we're really not aware of, so to speak. But I want to ask you this next question, if I could. I understand that for a lot of people that selling is something that raises a level of maybe fear, some consternation.
Yeah.
They feel almost kind of creepy or weird about, but remember, we're in business to make a profit on purpose. So I'm assuming that everyone listening to the show isn't selling cocaine or isn't selling things that are going to hurt people, that you're in the business to serve your market, your clients, customers, patients. And so what you're offering to them is something that's valuable and it's good and it's wholesome and things like that. But there is a better way to sell. And so selling with stories. So my question is, Paul, what does it mean to sell with a story? And could you give us an example of why it's one of the most effective, if not the most effective way to actually sell using story in the process?
Yeah, well, let me address the first part of that question first, because I think you're right. A lot of people, me included, feel gross trying to sell themselves. I think that's a very natural reaction to professionals who are not professional salespeople. Professional salespeople, I mean, you wouldn't be in the business if you weren't comfortable selling. But if you're a dentist or a lawyer or an artist or a auto mechanic or whatever you are, you've got to sell your wares, your services somehow. You didn't get into that profession because you were comfortable and wanted to sell all the time. You wanted to help people, with the thing that it is that you have the skill to do. And so for many of us like that, having to all of a sudden become the salesperson on a regular basis, we're just not comfortable with it. So let's just use the example that we've already used, so about the Pig Island and Chris Guglielmello. Do you think Chris Guglielmello was putting a hard sales pitch on me when he told me that story about the pig? Do you think he felt awkward and gross and smarmy telling me about how he took the picture of that pig?
No, he was excited and probably had a huge smile on his face, and he was reliving the experience in his head.
Exactly. It was just a conversation he and I were having, right? And he was telling me a story about how he got that picture of the pig, and that sold me. So the point is, telling stories to sell people it should be and feel like that. It should feel like we're just having a conversation and I'm telling you some interesting stories, as opposed to, imagine what he could have done. He could have said, now, Paul, look, there are 3 reasons why you need to buy this picture of the pig from me right now, all right? First of all, it's the right size to fit in the bathroom where your wife wants it to go, all right? Second of all, it's the right color palette, because she's already showed me a picture of the bathroom and I've seen all the towels and the colors on the wall and the pattern fits. And thirdly, it's in the right price range that you've already told me you're willing to pay for this picture. So you need to buy this picture from me right now. That would have been a sales pitch, right? And it probably wouldn't have worked because there were probably hundreds of pictures at that art fair that met all 3 criteria, right? But there was only one picture at that art fair that had a really fascinating story behind it, at least that I found out about. And so that's why that's the one that's hanging up in the wall in the bathroom upstairs, right? So that should feel, you should, if you feel gross telling a sales story, you're not doing it right at all. And that's one of the benefits of telling stories instead of relying only on sales pitches, is that it should be comfortable for you to deliver, because you're just telling a story.
I can tell you from firsthand experience, I've worked with both over the last 20 years. Chiropractors seem to be, as a general rule, and certainly I haven't met all the chiropractors or worked with all the dentists in the world, but thousands. Chiropractors generally are more outgoing and gregarious, whereas dentists seem to be a little more, maybe not necessarily introverted, but they're not quite as, bubbly and outgoing and engaging and things like that. But my thought has always been, for both, whether you're a chiropractor or a dentist, but especially dentists, When you're working with a patient and they're in your chair, I mean, you've got a captive audience. Not necessarily when you're drilling into their mandible or, you're putting in an implant or you're drilling a tooth or whatever, or, they're heavily sedated or whatever the case may be. But when they're in your chair and there is some banter that goes back and forth between the doctor and the patient, that's the perfect opportunity to utilize this thing of selling with a story.
Yeah. In fact, I can't think of too many other situations where a professional has not only a captive audience, but a audience who can't actually even respond as easily. You got the dental tools in your mouth. It's hard to talk back, right? So you almost have an obligation, I think, to fill the silence with something. And it can either be the television, that's on, or it can be the music in the background, or better yet, it can be you telling them some interesting stories.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I noticed that a lot of dentists do with their hygienist or their assistant is they will talk back and forth to one another. Mm-hmm. So they could utilize that as time to tell a story. And the patient obviously, is listening to what's going on between those two. Or they could actually be talking to the patient.
Let me finish a response to that then, because I think there are certain types of stories, and we haven't talked about these yet, but, in the book I lay out 25 different types of sales stories. And, we've only really talked about one of them, but some of the types that I think would be very good for somebody in the dental field to share while they've got that captive audience, largely who can't talk back all the time, are success stories of your other clients. So if you're working on somebody in your dental chair, they're already a customer, right? It's not like there's somebody walking around in your store deciding whether or not they're going to buy what you're selling or not. They've already decided. They're in your chair. You're working on them now. So the type of stories you tell people who are current customers are stories to help them want to be loyal to you in the future so that they will come back to you over and over and over again. And so in one of the chapters of the book, I talk about these loyalty building stories where basically you tell stories about your other clients who are super happy with the service that they get from you. All right, so they can hear about those people's experiences because that's the experience that they want to have. And you'll also be telling stories about, what other services that you offer that those people are happy. So basically, figure out who are your happiest customers, your best customers that buy the most of services from you. Tell stories about them so that your current customers can become your best customers. Because a lot of times people just don't know all the things that you can do. And, for a dentist, it might be, well, yeah, I can do your cleaning every 6 months, but did you know that I'm also an oral surgeon and I can do this? And did you know that I can also do, teeth whitening? And did you know that well, instead of just listing those things like I just did, tell a story about, I've got a client who, was coming to me for years and, eventually we noticed this. And so, we did some surgery and now their smile is much better. And, I've got some that are unhappy with their staining of their teeth. And so you're telling a story about how, you did their teeth whitening and how, the prom was much better for that 18-year-old or, whatever. But you're telling stories about happy customers so that the person sitting in the chair can realize, oh, I could be a happy customer like that too, a happier customer, by taking advantage of some of these other things that this dentist can do for me.
So there are, like you said, there are 25 different types of stories or models or frameworks you can use that you list in the book. But what are the basic elements of a really good sales story? And I think you listed 6 in the book, maybe 5 or 6. You start with a time and a place, and then maybe there's 5 or 6. There are 6.
Yeah, so what you're thinking of is kind of the defining characteristics of a story versus something that's not a story.
Yes.
So that is, there's a time, a place, a main character. That main character's got a goal. There's someone or something getting in the way of that goal. And there are events that transpire along the way that hopefully resolve themselves nicely in the end in either a success or a failure. Now, that's not how you create a great story. That's just how you create a story, right? And so if the words coming out of your mouth or that you're typing on the screen or writing on a piece of paper don't have those 6 attributes, it's not even a story, right? It's a list, right? It's a sales pitch, it's a memo, it's something else, but it's not a story. So I have to cover that early on in the book and in my training courses so that people know a sales is first and foremost a story. And second, it's a story that's in service of helping you make a sale. But if it's got to be a story first. So if you tried to say, like I kind of made up for Chris Goog there, look, there are 3 reasons why you need to buy my product. If you start out your narrative that way, there are 3 reasons why you need to buy my product, that are about to come out of your mouth are in no way going to be a story, right? You're about to give somebody a list of 3 reasons why you should buy what I'm selling. And that's fine, but just that's a sales pitch. And there's nothing wrong with sales pitches. You need them, okay? But that's not a story. If the first words out there are something like, oh yeah, that is a crazy idea. Yeah. So back in a few years ago at Big Major K in the Bahamas, there was this guy who, whatever. Now you're telling a story. All right. So it's got a time and a place and a main character, and the main character's facing a goal, and all that kind of stuff. So that's kind of, I call that, if you're a gambler, that's jacks to open, right? Your story at a minimum has to have those 6 things, or it's not even a story. Now, if you want to have it be a great story, you need a lot of other things, right? You need a good structure to the story. You need some emotional engagement. You need a surprise ending. You need some dialogue, other things. But those 6 are like, that's the minimum criteria to have a story that you're talking about.
I'm thinking of story, when you're dealing with whether you're a dentist dealing with a patient, or you're selling and you've got a prospect in front of you, you're a business owner, whatever it is, or you're actually talking about stuff online, in order to be effective, in order to actually be able to make that sale or that transaction or convert that prospective new patient into a patient, you've got to be able to keep them engaged in the dialogue with you. And that's one of the amazing things. If you think about it, what other element of communication has the ability, think of a movie, to get people, whether it's on television or whether it's in a theater, which most people don't go to theaters anymore, but what other art form or communication form has the ability to get somebody to stop doing what they're doing? And if it's compelling, if it's captivating, if it's magnetic, what other element of communication can literally cause people to stop everything else and filter everything else out in the world, including one of these, your smartphone, your iPhone, to put that aside and focus in on what's in front of them, i.e. a story. So if you're like at a really good movie, a riveting movie, like I think Star Wars, which personally I don't really care all that much for, but I mean, think about that. They're flying around in, stuff that looks like it was built on Sanford and Sons, in the junkyard, but it's supposed to be able to reach light speed and stuff. So there are a lot of things in that story that just, good story, but some things just don't add up. But it keeps people's attention. This is one of the only things, I don't know of anything else that can keep someone focused in on and fully engaged, where they're not even aware of what's going on around them. And that is a story. And so story has these unique abilities. You cover them in the book, has these unique abilities that other methods like a sales pitch don't have. Could you talk about that for a minute? And because I think this is something that's really important. And I think it's so obvious. A lot of us don't even stop to recognize the fact that, hey, this is true. This is powerful. This is something that I want to incorporate into my business. And I need Paul to show me how.
Yeah, I think you said it pretty well. I might add to that, this analogy. Imagine when you were back in college and the professor was, writing things on the board, and you were madly copying them down in your notes, and then they stopped writing things on the board, and they turned around and they just told you a story or an anecdote or gave you an example or something to help you understand what they were talking about, and then they turned back around and write more stuff on the board. During that time that they turned around and they were just telling you a story, what do you do as a student? What do the students do?
If they're engaged in the story, I would imagine that they're kind of living that out in their head.
Yeah, well, they put their pencil down, they lean back in their chair, and they just listen to the story, right? Because it isn't going to be on the test. This is just a story, right? I mean, so they stop being in critical evaluative mode, and trying to write everything down, and they just relax and listen to the story. And that's what you want your audience to do every once in a while, is can you just relax and listen to me instead of trying to poke holes in everything I'm saying constantly. Let me get a story out, and then we can talk about it, right? But stories just have that effect on people. It reaches that different part of the brain where they just want to listen and enjoy instead of feel like they're in the middle of this battle between a buyer and a seller.
Isn't that amazing? I mean, I am just so captivated by the ability of an element of communication that can actually, for lack of a better word, you're not really mesmerizing them, but you're really bypassing all of the critical firewalls that people throw up through the use of story. Let's run through a couple questions. Let me ask you this question. What would you say are the three top, if we could only learn three, or if we had to learn three story structures right out of the gate, which three would you recommend that we learn, and talk about each one of those for just a few minutes if you could?
Well, if it's just story structure you're talking about, it, there's only one that I would advocate, and it's the one I lay out in the book. I mean, there are lots of different story structures, right? I mean, beginning, middle, end is what your 10-year-old will tell you, and Joseph Campbell's got the 17-step hero's journey storytelling structure, and Pixar's got their, and Disney's got theirs. And I've studied all of them as part of doing this research, and my conclusion is basically all of them work. Right? I mean, they'll all work, but what you need as a business person is a structure that is simple enough to use to tell a 2 or 3 minute story, right? And Joseph Campbell's 17-step hero's journey storytelling structure is way too complicated. Now,
I think so.
Right, if you're going to write your first screenplay or your great American novel, knock yourself out with that. But if you're trying to craft a 2-minute story, it's just too much. The simple beginning, middle, end is just too simple because it's just not helpful. Well, what goes at the beginning? What goes in the middle? What goes in the end? It's not. You need something in between the two. So what I advocate is pretty simple: context, challenge, conflict, and resolution. Now you need into that, and you got to learn the right lesson on the way out. But what I found is that the clients that I coach, when I use language like that, context, challenge, conflict, resolution, all that kind of stuff, narrative arc, it just sounds so academic. It's hard for them to wrap their minds around that. So instead, what I've moved to is just giving them, here are the questions that I think your story needs to answer, and the order in which it should answer these questions. And that I find people find it easier to wrap their minds around. So here are the 8 questions, right? 1, why should I bother listening to the story, right? You got to answer that question first in the first 10 or 15 seconds, or they may not listen to your story, right? But once you've answered that question, then you've kind of earned the right to answer the next 5 questions in succession. Where and when did it take place? Who's the main character and what did they want? What was the problem or opportunity that they ran into? What did they do about it? And how did it turn out in the end? Okay, that's number 6, right? So so you just heard 1 through 6. So there are obviously a couple left, but that kind of gets you to the end of the story. And those 5 in the middle there should sound like the logical flow of a story, and I think it does. But the last 2 questions then are, what did you learn from the story? And what should I go do next? That's your opportunity to make a recommendation for them to either buy something or do something differently or whatever. So those are the 8 questions. And I think if you answer those questions in that order, a story will naturally emerge in the form that the human brain is expecting to hear a story. Now, you can make slight changes to that. Storytelling is an art, and you should take artistic license with it. But that's kind of home base. That's where you should. And you can get into trouble if you don't answer the where and the when until later in the story. It can frustrate people because they don't know if it's true or false. So that's a good place to start with that structure.
So actually, that was a great answer you gave, but I asked the question incorrectly. So the mistake was no, that's all right, because that actually was a phenomenal answer to another question that I was going to ask. But you mentioned earlier in the conversation about 25 different story frameworks, or maybe different times where you would use the story.
Which stories? Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah. So if you were, it was my fault. It's not a big deal, but because you gave a brilliant answer to another question I was going to answer. So I think that was very, very helpful. What about if someone was forced just right out of the gate? 3 stories. Yeah. If you were to say, hey, listen, for starters, you could use and benefit from all of these. And I teach you how to do that in the book, obviously. And guys, he couldn't have made this more simple. Okay. He could not have made this more simple. So for those of you who are like, I don't know if I can do this. Of course you can do this. And it's like easier than just adding water. And so with that, Paul, if you could, what would you say, just your gut visceral response? What comes to mind? The first 3 or best 3, or you say grab these first?
Yeah. So just in general, these 25 stories kind of span the entire sales process from the moment you introduce yourself or the moment you meet a prospect, somebody that might become a client of yours, to building rapport, to the actual sales pitch itself, if you have one, to resolving objections that come up, to closing the sale itself, and even to service after the sale and building loyalty like we talked about earlier for your existing clients. So those 25 stories kind of span all those parts of a normal sales cycle. If I had to pick three, I'd say the very first one, a story to explain what you do in simple terms. Now, if you're a chiropractor, you probably just have to say, I'm a chiropractor. Or if you're a dentist or a plumber or an electrician or, so things, many professions, people know immediately, well, I'm a lawyer. Okay, well, I get it. I know what you do.
Can I add something to that real
please.
quick? So just with respect to, I'll go with chiropractic and dental, and I'll say this quick. As a chiropractor, I was a specialist, and so most of the people listening have at least been to a chiropractor or know someone who's been to a chiropractor. You go to the chiropractor, you're like, okay, I have this pain or whatever. Most people only go to the chiropractor when they're in pain. The chiropractor should, I think most of them are smart enough to take pictures, radiographs, x-rays, show you the pictures and say, listen, you're out of alignment here. I need to fix this. Virtually most of the profession no longer actually will take another picture to show you that it's been fixed. And so the protocols and the treatment processes, the methods they're using no longer fix the structure. They're getting you out of pain because of, and this all comes about because of third-party insurance, and chiropractors are more like medical doctors now. But I was the kind of chiropractor that would actually take progress pictures and then final pictures and say, hey, look, three-dimensionally, if we use the Cartesian coordinate system, X, Y, and Z axis, you're as good as you're going to get. You're back to normal physiology and function, and therefore you don't need to keep coming in. You need to do these things at home to maintain yourself. With respect to dentistry, there's a methodology or a treatment protocol. There are several. One comes to mind is the Pankey Institute, what those doctors are learning, and then also another one called biorejuvenation, and that's where it's not just dentistry. It's where they restore the normal function of your chewing system, and by doing that, it can prevent your teeth from wearing out like for the rest of your life. So obviously you would have to still, practice good oral hygiene, brush and floss, and don't eat before you go to bed, and all the things that, a dentist is going to tell you, but it will dramatically reduce the wear of your teeth. It can prevent cavities. It can prevent gum recession, gum disease, periodontal disease. There's a whole lot of stuff. There's a huge benefit to that. And one of the things that happens to people as they age, their teeth start to wear away, and so their chin will start to approximate their nose. You've seen the bitter beer commercial. Remember that? And they look older. And so the thing with biorejuvenation, in addition to, a person might have jaw pain or headaches or tinnitus or vertigo ringing in their ears. They have a whole bunch of different problems. But in addition to getting rid of all those painful situations, they restore normal function. And as a result of that, the person not only is healthy now, and all those things have been eliminated, those ill effects, but they can literally look, in most cases, if they're old enough, they're going to look like a decade or two younger. That's what I would say is a typical response. So this is, I refer to this as non-surgical, not plastic surgery, but I call it age-reducing dentistry or something like that. It's just my own personal take on it. But from all the different cases that I've seen, it has literally blown me away that you can actually transform someone like this. And that's why I really kind of fell in love with it, because it really parallels what I did with chiropractic biophysics. I was a specialist. So biorejuvenation dentistry and the other types of dentistry, they're like that. So there is a distinct difference, and not many dentists practice this, but the value of the patients coming in to see a biorejuvenation dentist or a dentist who's a graduate, a certified graduate of the Pankey Institute. This is a much higher level of dentistry. Their average case fee is anywhere from $50,000 to $100,000, and this is not insurance. This is, throwing down the American Express, the Black Card, or, writing a check for it or whatever. So the ability for these dentists to be able to tell really powerful and effective stories, if we could teach them how to do that, which your book is the starting point for that, and then carry on with that, they're going to be able to take a lot more of those high value prospective patients and convert them through the use of properly constructed, well thought out stories based on your framework that can help them much more easily convert those people into paying patients, and really transform that patient's life, but really transform the dentist's bank account as well. I mean, this is one of the things that's got me so interested in your work, is the upside potential for all these dentists It's like 2 or 3% of the profession, but that's, that could be 10,000 dentists.
Yeah, well, you basically just touched on all three that I was going to mention of the types of stories that if I had to pick 3 out of the 25. So the first one, and I think you've convinced me more that just saying you're a dentist is not good enough, since there are all kinds of specialties within that. So telling a story to help explain what it is that you do so that people can understand on a human level what you do. The second one would be, I call it a problem story, so I think it's number 13 on my list. But it's a story that explains the problem that you can solve for them. So it's a story about somebody who has, in that case, some kind of a dental issue, or a chiropractic issue, et cetera. And then the third one is, I guess I would say, a customer success story. So that second one is a story about the problem. The third one is a story about the solution. Right, so those 3, if I had to pick, out of the 25, those are 3 very important stories to have. If I could go one more though, one that I think everybody needs to be able to tell is a story about how are you different than your competition, because you're probably not the only dentist or chiropractor in town, right? So if you can tell a story that helps illustrate the difference between how you do what you do versus how somebody else does what you do, and yours is more attractive, that will help people will want to come back to you more often and not go somewhere else.
Let me throw a qualifier in, guys. When I ask for the 3 that just come to mind, I'm not trying to insinuate in any way, shape, or form that you only need 3 of these. Listen, I don't know if I could learn all these 25 different,
Yeah, we probably
ways
don't need 25 either. But you probably need 7, 8, 10, 12, more than 2 or 3 that you need.
Yes, and if someone is saying, "Hey, listen, that seems like a lot to memorize." No, it's really not. If you think about the stories that you tell in life, because you're going to use these same stories over and over and over again, and like Paul said, they're small, and it gives you like a step by step. It's almost like holding you by the hand in the book to walk through that. So, Paul, do you have time for one more question?
I do.
All right, so I'm going to ask you one more question, then I'm going to ask a question about how we can find out more about what it is that you're doing, your work, your books, any of your training, things like that. But what's the one question today that I didn't ask that I should have asked?
God, you asked a lot of them. Maybe what is it that makes a great story a great story? So, and there's a lot in the book, and I kind of rattled off a few things. I had to pick, 3 or 4 things that really makes a great story a great story. And you mentioned Star Wars earlier, so I'd say, and this applies there as well, a hero we care about, a villain we're afraid of, and an epic battle between them, right? So you can imagine, Darth Vader and your Luke Skywalker and the, lightsaber battle or whatever. Now that sounds rather Hollywood, but you can translate that into, business story friendly language, like that hero just becomes a relatable main character, right? And that villain we're afraid of just becomes a relevant challenge, or the kind of obstacle your audience is likely to run into on a daily basis. So it doesn't even have to be a person, a villain. It could be the mountain you're trying to climb, or the pain that you've got in your tooth, or the discomfort you've got in your back, or whatever. That's the villain of the story. And then that epic battle between them doesn't need to be an epic battle, but the audience needs to see the main character struggle with the problem a little bit before the solution, or it's just a boring story. So
without struggle,
exactly,
there is no story.
Right. So those are kind of the 3 elements that you need: a relatable main hero, a relevant challenge, and an honest struggle. That's what differentiates boring stories from great stories.
Okay, so Paul, what are some things you're working on now, and how can people find out more about you? Do you have any training you want to talk about or share? Because I'd love to send everybody listening, I'd love to give them that information so they can take a visit and look at your website.
Yeah, well, thank you. What I mostly spend my time doing, which is what I'm about to head to the airport now to do, is teaching leaders how to be leaders or salespeople or marketers or whoever, how to be better at their job through storytelling. So I have full day training courses, and sometimes it's just a keynote speech. But so for people that don't have time to read the books, I will come to you and teach you kind of hands-on how to craft these. So I've got that going on all the time. I do have a couple of new books out. The one that we're talking about today came out in 2016. I've got a new book that just came out a couple of months ago called The 10 Stories Great Leaders Tell. So instead of, the 25 sales stories you got to tell, I'm trying to get a little bit more focused, for a general leadership audience. What are the 10 most important stories that you ought to be able to tell? And then this might surprise you, but I've got another book coming out actually at the end of this month, which is a biography, actually, of a cognitively impaired deaf man who's partially blind in one eye, and but just a fascinating human being. And he's kind of a combination of a Helen Keller and a Forrest Gump. So it's called 4 Days with Kenny Tedford. It will almost certainly be the most important thing I think that I'll ever write in my life. But that's out this month. So as far as where to find me, probably my website has all of those things, the links to the training and all the books. So that's leadwithastory.com, which is just the name of my first book. But that website, leadwithastory.com, will get you access to all this stuff.
All right, guys, that's going to wrap up part one of my interview with Paul Smith, the author of the book, Sell with a Story, Lead with a Story, and Parenting with a Story. And in our next episode, Paul's going to actually pull back the curtain and show us some of his best techniques so we can learn how to sell with a story. And with that, I'll see you on the next episode. If your business is struggling and you can't crack the online marketing code, and you'd like to access the newest and most effective strategies, systems, and tools that are working right now in the trenches, check out the funneltribes.com online community and discover how thousands of consultants and professionals just like you are transforming their businesses, building massive tribes of loyal clients, and making more money.